All right, what time we'll get started right away. We have our work cut out for us. And today we find ourselves on Ayin Het. But we begin today's daf on Ayin Zayin Amud Bet. So we begin Ayin Zayin Amud Bet towards the bottom. Ve'amar Rabba. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. So a person lent 100 dinarim to his friend, and he paid back. But how did he pay back? He paid back 1 zuz at a time. So the Gemara comes along and says, it's a payback, even though he paid it back incrementally. But he can have a complaint. What's the complaint? The Elmaleh, because the Malveh could say, Absid, you caused me to lose the money, which means when a person gets paid back in small increments, he takes the money, he spends it, and therefore, before you know it, the whole money is gone. If you would have paid him back in one shot, it's a lump sum that you put back in the bank, that you put back in the safe deposit. But since he paid him back incrementally, so you got $100 here, $100 you're going to go to the bank for that, you put it in your pocket. Before you know it, you bought groceries with it. Therefore, before you know it, the whole loan is gone. So therefore, you can't blame the person. At the end of the day, he paid the 100 dinarim back. But there's a taromet, there's a complaint. Hahu gabra. Okay, it's official. We have a hahu gabra on every single daf so far. So there's another hahu gabra. There's a bin lehamra lehabre. So he sold a hamor to his friend. Ufash lehazuza, and there was 1 zuz left that he didn't pay. So let's say it cost 100, he paid him 99, and he owed him a zuz. Beka ayil v'nafik azuza, and the seller was very, very aggressive, trying to collect the extra zuz. So now again, we learned on yesterday's daf that when you see that behavior, that means he doesn't want the kinyan to be hal until he actually gets all paid. The other side would say is that no, the kinyan is hal and the money is owed to him. So the Gemara says, the ka'ayil v'nafik azuzah, he was very aggressive trying to collect that extra zuzah. Tivra Vashe become ma'ayin. But so Vashe analyzed it and he said, Ki ay gavna mai. What do you say in such a case? Kaneh or lo kaneh? Do you say that such a small amount? I mean, he paid 99, he only owes 1, so maybe in such a small amount we say that the kinyan is a kinyan, even though he's going after it. But bottom line, he paid the lion's share of it. Or do we say no? At the end of the day, if he's going after 1, adraba, the fact that he's so needy for 1 zuz or 1 dinar, so therefore it could be the kinyan is not going to be a kinyan until he actually pays. Elmaleh Mordechai Rabashe, Achi Amar Abimim Hagronya. Doesn't make a difference. Zuzah. Whether it's 1 zuz, whether it's many zuz, bottom line, you see from the behavior of the mocher, of the seller, if he is aggressive trying to collect that 1 coin, 10 coins, all the same. Bottom line, he doesn't want the kinyan to be hal until until it's fully paid. Amar le. So he came along and he said, Rabbi Haberid Rav Yosef Ravashe. So what are you talking about? You're quoting Rabbi that says lo kaneh. It's not koneh. However, we have a statement in the Rabbi that actually says it is koneh. Even if you see the guy running after his money, the mocher is running after his money to try to get paid. Rabbi says it's a kinyan. How do you square this off? Elmaleh tetargem shematik b'mocher sadehu mepnei ra'ata. So we're talking about over here a case where a person, let's say, is selling his field, and he has a field that is inferior, right? So therefore, if he's selling an inferior field, even if he's running after the money, he's happy. He's happy that he sold it, and therefore he just wants to run after the money so the guy doesn't maybe back out. In that case, over there, Rabbi says the kinyan is a kinyan, even if there's some money outstanding, even if he didn't pay the whole thing. In our case over here, where he wasn't selling a field, he was selling a donkey. There wasn't an inferior field. Therefore, if he didn't get paid and he's running after the money, then Rabbi will agree there is no kinyan. Now the Gemara comes along and says, Peshita. Peshita means it is obvious in the following case that what? Ba'el zibune b'me'ah velo eshkach. Let's say a guy needs 100 dinarim. Okay, guys, the guy's pressed. He needs 100 dinarim, and therefore he wants to sell a small field in order to get liquid. He needs liquid cash, so he wants to sell a small field, but he can't find anybody to buy that field. Vezabin b'matayim. So what did he do? He was forced to sell a bigger field that he had. Now he didn't want to sell the big field. He wants to keep the big field for himself. He has no choice. He couldn't find customers for the small field, so he ends up having to sell the big field that's worth 200 dinarim, and now the buyer didn't pay him the 200, and he didn't pay him fully. And now the guy's running and trying to get paid. He wants this money, so therefore Gemara says Peshita lo kaneh. For sure, there's no kinyan over here, because first of all, the guy didn't want to sell it in the first place. The guy's only selling it because he needs the 100. And now the guy didn't pay the full money, and he's going after it. So therefore, for sure, in this case over here, it's not going to be. Even if he paid the 100, so he just owes 100. So he said, well, if he paid 100, that's all he wanted is 100. Maybe it should be a kinyan. We say no, since already the fact that he's going after the balance, it's not because the field is not Habib to him. He liked this field. Before we came along and said, when the field is not a good field, when it's a karka giru'ah, he's just happy to sell it. And therefore, the fact that he's running after the money, he just doesn't want the buyer to back out. But over here, he actually sold a beautiful field. And therefore, you cannot use that sevara. And therefore, the Gemara says, for sure, if he's owed money, he wants to get paid because he didn't want to sell this field in the first place. And therefore, the kinyan is not going to be the kinyan. But we go the reverse way. Let's say he had a field. Let's say he needs 100 dinarim. The guy's pressed. And what? He's trying to sell a field, but he can't find a customer. However, if he would run around and toil himself, he would find. That means he cannot find a customer easily for the 100 field. But if he would go do his due diligence, he can find a customer. So the Gemara says, but he was lazy. He said, you know what? It's easier for me to sell the 200 field because there's always a customer for that than to have to run around to sell the 100. But if I would go run around, I'd be able to find a customer. And he ended up selling the 200. And now he's running around in order to collect the money that is owed. So Gemara wants to say, what's the din over here? In this case over here, since if he would have exerted himself a little extra, he could have gotten the field, the small field, and sold it, and he didn't do it. And therefore, instead, what did he do? He sold the big field. He's getting more money than he needs. So therefore, that shows what? That this field is not Habib to him. He sold it. You didn't have to sell this field. You could have sold the small field. So then once it's not Habib to him, or it's not important to him, so therefore running after the money is no indication that he wants to nullify the kinyan. On the contrary, the fact that he sold it and he didn't have to, say it like that, the fact that he sold the big field and he didn't have to sell the big field, that shows that the field is not so precious to him, and therefore the fact that he's running after the money is not an indication that he doesn't want the sale to be nullified. Adrabah, he's happy that he sold the field. So therefore we'll say, and therefore that's considered like selling a field that's inferior. What did we learn above? Rabotai, we learned when you're selling a field that is inferior, you just want to sell the field. And even if the guy didn't pay you fully, you don't want to mevatel the kinyan, even if you're running after the money. So similarly over here, since he could have sold the small field, and instead he sold the big field, so that's no indication, that is an indication that the big field to him is not so precious, and therefore he's happy to sell it regardless, even if he wasn't paid. Or no, or maybe no. Maybe that we don't explain it that way. Maybe we don't say that the fact that he could have sold the first field, maybe it was hard to sell the first field since it's the Tadha, and maybe he doesn't really want to sell the second field, and therefore the fact that he didn't get paid, maybe the kinyan is not. And the Gemara says, Tiku, Rabotai, we're going to have to wait for Eliyahu Navi to answer that question. Sachar et hamar v'takadar. You hire the donkey driver or the wagon driver in order to do a melacha. And the case Rabbi was talking about, that if they're not going to do the melacha, there's going to be a loss. And of course, the workers, you can't trust them. What they do? They backed out in the middle of the job. So now we said what? Socher alehen. You could hire more expensive workers to replace them, or mat'an, or you could trick them. And you could tell them, don't worry, we'll pay you double, just continue to work. And then you don't have to pay them the double. So the Gemara says, Ad kama socher alehen. How much more money are you able to hire the new workers for? At what price? Amar Rav Nachman ad kedeh secharan, which is whatever the price of the first workers was, which means they already did half the job. So of course you have to pay them for the half the job, according to most Rishonim. And now whatever the second half is, so that's what you can hire up to that they could lose their entire chelik of the job that they did not do. And therefore the Balabayit obviously can hold that money and give that money, all of it, to the new workers. But what do you mean? We have a Mishnah that says Ad 40 v'hamishim zuz. It says you can take new workers that even will cost you 40 or 50 zuz. And that's much more than the first worker was working for. Elmaleh kitanyahi. That bright over there is talking about shebata habila liyado. So we're talking about over here where sometimes the workers would bring their tools with them. That's a custom. How's a worker going to work? He has to bring his tools. And when they bring their tools to the work site, the understanding is that if they don't work, the Balabayit can use those tools against their work. And therefore, let's say the tools are worth 40 or 50 zuz. So therefore, that becomes the Balabayit. It can use the tools in order to pay for the new workers. It's almost as an unspoken agreement. When they bring their tools to the work site, as if they're saying, if we don't finish the job, you can take the tools and pay new workers. And that was the case where we said 40 and 50. And therefore, the workers will lose actually up into that amount. And now we go to the next Mishnah, Socheret HaHamor. Okay, now a guy's renting a Hamor. What? In order to transport merchandise. And there's two ways for him to reach the destination. One way is he can go up the mountain, and one way he can go through the valley. Of course, going up a mountain seemingly would be harder for a donkey than walking through the valley, seemingly. So the Gemara says, Mishnah says, Lo licho bahar, which means if he rented the donkey, and what? He said, I'm renting you the donkey and I want you to take it through the mountain. And he didn't listen. And what did he do? Instead, he took him through the valley. Or the opposite. The stipulation was, I want you to take the donkey through the valley. And he took him through the mountain, which is bottom line, the socher, the renter, did not listen to instructions. Not only did he listen, he did the opposite. So the Gemara Mishnah says, Afilu zu eser milin, bezu eser milin. Even though all things are equal. I mean, distance-wise, it's the same distance. So you can't say, well, by taking the mountain, he traveled more. No, everything is the same. However, Vameta, of course, what happened? The animal died. Hayav. So now the socher the renter has to compensate the owner of the donkey because of the damage. And the explanation is going to be because he didn't listen. Now, normally, when you rent something and the animal dies, it's not my fault it died. I rented an animal. It's your fault. You have to compensate me back. In this case, you didn't listen. It's your fault because you were mishaneh, as the Gemara will explain in depth. Now, the Mishnah gives a similar case, but now starts giving us what happened, how it died. So you have a donkey. He rented it, let's say, to go in the mountainous area. And while he took it in the Bik'ah, and what happened? Let's say the animal slipped. That's how it died. Patur. Now, it slipped in the valley. Now, the owner was willing to take a risk that even if he goes on a mountain, it's okay. Now, there's more chances for him to slip on a mountain than in a valley. And if the owner was going to take the risk of going up a mountain, certainly he was going to take the risk of going into the valley. So since the cause of death was less likely in the place where the renter walked the animal, he is not hayav. He'll be patur. However, ve'imhu hama. But let's say he died of heat stroke, which because the valley is very hot, because there's no wind in the valley, because the mountains are blocking the wind. Then already hayab. Because I didn't tell you to go into the valley. I told you to go into the mountain. So interesting. In this part of the Mishnah, it's not like the first part of the Mishnah. First part of the Mishnah just said you didn't listen. That's it. And the animal died. the renter is hayav. Now we're giving reasons. Oh, you didn't listen? What's the reason why he died? Oh, if he died because of heat, exhaustion, heat stroke, hayav. And if he died because he slipped, patur. So we have to see why in the Reshai we didn't give a reason of death, and cause of death, and the Sefer we're giving cause of death. Let's go the other way. The holicha b'bik'ah holicha bahar. Now let's say he said, the renter, the owner said, I'll rent you my animal that you could take in the valley. And instead he didn't listen, of course, and he brought it into the mountain. Hayab, and it slipped hayab. Again, the reason why if it slipped hayab is because you took it to a place where it's more prone to slip. I didn't want to take that risk. The owner only let you take it in the valley where it's less prone to slip. You took it in a place where it's more prone to slip, and therefore the renter is going to be hayab. However, imu hama patur. But if it died because of heat, patur, it's exempt. Why? Because the owner was allowing you to bring it into the valley, which is much more hot than the mountain. The mountain has the cold air, and therefore, if it died from heat on top of the mountain, where it's less prone to do that, therefore the owner was taking a bigger risk, and therefore he was allowing you to bring it into the valley. So therefore, it's going to be patur. Now the Gemara comes along and says, however, if let's say the reason why he overheated was because of the exhaustion of the incline walking up the mountain, and I guess there's a way to determine that. It means they took it to the coroner's office and they said cause of death, heat exhaustion. And then we have to ask the coroner one more question: heat exhaustion from what? Is it from the sun, or is it because of the fact that he had to have a steep incline up the mountain? If the forensics come back and say, oh, we figured it out, it's because of the steep incline, then it's the renter's fault, because the owner came along and said, I don't want you to put it on the mountain, I want you to bring it in the valley. Therefore, hayav. And now we talk about a case where somebody rented a hamor v'hivrika. Vrika, the Gemara will say, something happened in his eyes. He got spots in his eyes, and therefore, obviously, it caused the animal to become blind. So now he has a blind hamor. That's not enough. He's a hamor, now he's a blind hamor. You can imagine how useless that is. Or shena'asid angaria, or the animal became conscripted by the government. In the olden days, the king would come into a town and see a hamor. He would take it for his own service. But the poor renter now, he rented an animal for a certain job, and now all of a sudden the government confiscated it. So the din over here is like this: Omer lo, the owner can tell the renter, I said, listen, between my mazal and your mazal, this happened. It's nobody's fault. It's my fault, your fault. You have a bad mazal, I have a bad mazal, we both have bad mazal. Listen, now you got to deal with the blind animal. You got to work harder now. They have to walk in front of it and guide it. And the fact that the government took your animal, okay, Bezat Hashem, when they give it back to you, you'll be able to continue. But I don't have to pay you any compensation. You can say that it was your mazal that actually caused it. However, meta, if the animal died, or let's say broke its leg, which basically was unable to do any work, then of course the owner is going to be hayav la'amid hamor. Then he has to replace it and give him another hamor. And the Rashi says over here, Hayava maskil limkora orva nebela lekelabim. Let him sell the carcass to the dog and the hide to the dogs. Ulosif ma'ot, and then add some money if it's needed. Ula'amido hamor, and get him a different donkey. Or yiskodo acher b'dmei nebela shaleh hamor zeh shabed lo or yachzor l'skaro. Exactly. He gave him this hamor to work. Either give me back my money or give me the hamor. There's no business. If it died, regular renter that rents an animal, the animal dies. What's the law? The owner has to pay for it because that was the deal. Didn't die because of any mistake that I made. It died stop. So now the Gemara comes along and says, beautiful. Now we start the Gemara. The Resha just came along and said, listen, the renter did not follow instructions. I said use it in the valley. You used it in the mountain. Vameta hayav. Period. In the Sefer, in the exact same case, you questioned. Oh, you said valley, and he put it in the mountain. Well, why did he die? If he died from exhaustion, from heat, well, you were letting me put it in the valley. So if you were willing to take a risk of the valley, which is more hot, certainly I don't have a problem on the mountain. But if it died because it tripped, it slipped, well, then you're hayav. because you only wanted me to take it into the valley where it doesn't slip usually, and I took a bigger risk. Point is, why in the Sefer you giving me reasons? In the Resha you just said you didn't listen, Hayab. In the Sefer I'm explaining cause of death. The Gemara says, Amre deber Rabbi Yanai, Resha, the Resha when it said in the Mishnah that what we know that what the animal did not die because it tripped or because of exhaustion. Ela what it died in the normal way. However, the owner could come along and say, Shemeta Mahmat Avir, which means it died because of the air. Which means, let's say, I don't know about these animals, but certain animals that they're not used to the mountain air, they don't react correctly. So therefore, who told you to take it to the mountain? He's only used to breathing the air of the valley. The Amrinan Avirad the Harkatla. It was the Avir of the mountain that killed him. Or the Amrinan Avirad the Bik'ar Katla. Which is over there in the first case of the Mishnah, it's got nothing to do. He didn't slip and he didn't die of heat exhaustion. The issue over here is it was the air that killed him. So if it's the air that killed him, we don't have to have any. That's the cause of death. And therefore, since you put him in a place where he's not used to that air, for example, he's a valley hamor, and you took him to the mountain. Now you made him a mountain hamor, and he died because of the air. So that's your fault, regardless. Gemara says a different explanation. Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina Amar, Kegon shemeta ma'mat ubsena, cause of death, ubsena. What's it ubsena? Exhaustion, and therefore he's going to have to pay regardless. Which means he can come along and say, "I told you to bring him into the valley. You brought him on top of a mountain. The animal's not used to climbing up all this incline, and therefore a cause of death is exhaustion. Therefore, it's going to be hayab to pay. Therefore, you caused it to be tired. Look at the Rashi over here. That she says ubsina ayefut v'gi'ah. You got tired. Mimasa'a. Again, you have to remember there's a load on the back. הוליכה בהר, יכול לומר לו, עייפות המעלה שעלתה לראש ההר הועילה מתחילה, על כן, עייפה לה נחל זמשה, even though it didn't die immediately. But the reason why it died later on is because you exhausted it by walking up the mountain. It didn't collapse as it was walking up the mountain. But later on, it died. So the renter comes and says, hey, the animal died. The owner could say, well, of course it died. Look what you did. I told you to put it in the valley where it's a flat terrain. But by causing this animal to work extra hard by climbing up the mountain, that causes its ultimate death. So therefore, שעלתה לראש ההר הועילה מתחילה, על כן עייפה לה נחל זמשה כשהלכה בדרך חלקה. And that's why even when she walked on the regular road, she collapsed. ויגעה תחת מסעה ומתה. ואם שינה לו לך בבקעה, and if let's say instead of bringing her on to the top of the mountain, he brought her into the valley, אף על פי שלא ראינו אותה מזעת ולא היה חם מאוד, even though we don't see the animal was exhausted from heat, we didn't see it was excessively hot that day. יש לומר, אם הלכה בהר, היה אוויר שולט שם ונותן בה כוח ולא תיגע. On the contrary, we'll say if she was on the mountain, the air is so cool, therefore she wouldn't have become exhausted. The reason why she got exhausted in the valley is because since there's not so much air, and therefore eventually she collapsed. Basically, we're saying the reason why in the Mishnah we don't have to give a reason of the cause of death is because we know the cause of death. The reason was she died of fatigue, and we can blame that because of the change. You were supposed to take her in the valley. You took the hamor in the mountain. So climbing up. Now eventually it died when it was going on a straight surface, let's say. But you know why it died on a straight surface? Because you made it go up the mountain. And reverse. When you were supposed to take it onto the mountain and you took it into the valley and it collapsed in the valley. We're not saying it was because of any heat in the valley. We just saw it collapse, and we're going to say that had you taken it into the mountain, could be the air that was in the mountain, which was cool, would have given the animal a little extra koah and strength, and you didn't listen, and that's why you're going to be hayab. And therefore, the renter is always going to be hayab. And now the Gemara comes along and says, Rava Amar, kegon shekisha nahash. Third answer. The case in the beginning is talking about where it got bitten by a snake. And therefore the renter is hayab in all places over here. Because why? He could always say, if you would have brought the animal where I told you to bring it, when they got bitten by a snake. You were supposed to bring it in the valley. You brought it in the mountain. Where did it get bitten by a snake? On the mountain. Who told you to bring it to the mountain? You should have brought it to the mountain. Or vice versa. And that's why it's going to be Hayab. Now the Gemara comes with Hayab, but Abba Amar, Rabbi Yochanan. New explanation. You know who the author of the Mishnah is? Rabbi Meir. Hamani Rabbi Meir. Amar Kol Ma'avir Al Da'at Ba'al Habayit. Whoever changes from the instructions of the Ba'al Habayit, Nikra Gazlan. Oh. Now we have a new Shita of Rabbi Meir. You come along and you change from the opinion of the Ba'al Habayit. The Gemara will give an example. Ba'al Habayit gives you wool and says, do me a favor, dye it black. And instead of dyeing it black, you dye it red. Hazak Baruch. You didn't listen. Rabbi Meir says that's a gazlan. And we learned in Baba Kama that when you make a shinui like that, the gazlan owns it. That's it. You bought it. You koneh b'shinui. Now, who owns that new dyed, red dyed wool? The gazlan, the worker. And now he has to compensate and pay back full price to the owner, to the one that gave it to him. So then what do you see from Rabbi Meir? Whenever you change from the dot of the Ba'al Habayit, you become a gazlan. So this case over here, the Ba'al Habayit said bring it in the field, in the valley. You brought it in the mountain, finished. At that point that you brought it on the mountain, you're a gazlan, and therefore you're hayab on everything. We don't have to give the reason of death. You're a gazlan, you stole it. Once you steal it, it's game over. So the Rashi says, Nikra Gazlan, Ve'kamale b'rshuteh letchayev, and therefore it becomes in his possession to be hayab, b'shil unseh, even if it's honest, which is, I don't care what the reason is. Let's say now it got struck by lightning. Let's say the guy told him, I want you to bring my donkey in the valley. And he didn't listen, he brought it into the mountain. And it got struck by lightning. That's totally honest. Doesn't matter, according to the Meir, hayab, why? You're a gazlan. But if I stole something, and the item that I stole got struck by lightning, could I tell the guy, well, listen, I know I stole it from you, but it got hit by lightning. Don't steal it. I haven't onsim. Because that is I haven't onsim. And therefore, we're going to say that Resha is Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara says, hey, Rabbi Meir. Where do we see Rabbi Meir's opinion? The Gemara says the case I told you. Either might Rabbi Meir the Sabah, Rabbi Meir of the dyer meaning D-Y, Ditnan. We learned the Baba Kama, page 100. Hanoten sema lesabah lesbo alo adom. You gave it him to the dyer to dye the wool red. Usba'o shahor, and he did it black. O shahor usba'o adom. Basically, the dyer has a brain of his own and doesn't listen. Rabbi Meir omer noten no demes samro. Rabbi Meir says you have to pay back full. Why? Because at the time that you changed, the dyer owns it, kinyan gezelah. And as a result, you have to compensate and you have to pay back the owner full value. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Remember, we learned the Rabbi Yehuda's shita the other day. The Rabbi Yehuda said we make the dyer pay back the higher of the two. If the higher of the two is the expenses that he paid, the raw materials in order to do the work, then I'll have to pay back the raw materials. Or if the let's say the enhancement is more expensive, so we measure what is more expensive, the raw materials that he used or expensive. The Gemara says, if the enhancement is more than the yetziah, than the expenses paid, so then the din is noten lo et the yetziah. The owner only has to pay the cheaper of the two. He'll pay just the expenses. And if the expenses are more than the enhancement, because bottom line, the wool did get enhanced, which is basically the owner only has to pay for the cheaper of the two. Okay, that's the biudah. But the Rabbi says no. Over there you're a gazlan, and therefore the Rabbi says the dyer has to pay the whole thing. Which is, he doesn't have to return it. You don't return it. He owns it. How much is it worth now? I don't know. How much is the semid worth at the time of the gezelah? It's worth whatever it is. He has to pay back full payment. So what do you see according to Meir? When you don't listen to instructions, that makes the person a gazlan, and that's the case in the Mishnah. The renter did not listen to instructions, therefore he's a gazlan. The Gemara says, "Mimai, what are you talking about? Over there, the reason why he's a gazlan, dilma shani atam dekanya b'shinui maaseh, because he did a shinui maaseh. Over here, he just didn't listen. He told them valley and he did mountain, but you didn't make a change in the animal. So that doesn't make it a gazlan. Maybe the only reason why to be misid over there by the case of the dying, that he becomes a gazlan because he changed it and she knew it's koneh. Bad proof. Ela to be meid the mikbat purim. And we came to Florida, we talk about purim. Ela to be meid the mikbat purim. Talking about the collection of the money of purim. What's the deen? The Tanya. Mikbat purim, the money that you collected for tzedakah and purim to give to the aniyim, le purim. You can't change it. When the people gave it, they gave it with kavanah that you should give it to the aniyim on purim. And therefore you cannot use it for other reasons. Mikbat ta'ir or ta'ir for that matter. Mikbat ta'ir, let's say you collected for the city, there's a certain tzedakah. You can't switch it now for a different tzedakah. The people gave it for a certain kavanah. The en medaktikim bedabar. So different explanations on what en medaktikim bedabar. We'll say it simply on purim and not medaktik. Somebody comes and asks us all year long, normally we say, where's your paper? Let's investigate. Does he really need it? But on purim, kol poshet yad, notnim lo. En medaktikim bedabar. On purim, you give. Fine. Aval, lochim et agalim, v'shodim. You just take a lot of, the anim have to eat on purim. So you take the animals and you slaughter them. V'shochati, v'ochlim otam. Now what do you do with the leftovers? Okay, now purim is over. There's a lot of leftover meat. V'amotar yipon nekish tzedakah. And the leftovers that the anim did not eat on purim, so they go into the tzedakah fund. Rabbi Ezra omer, mikbat purim le purim. Of course, that the funds of purim should be spent for purim. Now we talk about what the ani could do with the money. I gave the ani money on purim for Saudah. Now the guy wants to buy a pair of shoes. They don't know you cannot buy a pair of shoes with it. Unless he made a stipulation, unless the Gabbai Tzedakah was collecting made a stipulation in front of the people that were collecting this money that the anim could do whatever they want. Okay, then already will be permissible. Devrei Rabbi Yaakov, Shama Mishum Rabbi Meir. And that's the opinion that of Rabbi Yaakov that said the name of Rabbi Meir. Rabban Shimon Gamliel Meker. And he comes along and says you could take the money of Purim and use it for something else, and as long as you're doing it for a mitzvot, as long as you're giving it to Aniyim, it's okay. And Aniyim could use the money for different things, not only for food, they could use it for even buying shoes or something like that, even though they're switching from the kavanah. But according to the Meir, there's the point now. The Meir said what in the name of the Ezer, Ma'ot Purim, you can only use it for what they gave it for, and you can't switch it for something else. So what do you see over here? You must follow the instructions of the people that gave it. So therefore, the people gave it al da'at Purim, you have to do it Purim. So the same thing over here. They gave it al da'at Bik'ah, and you did it on the Har. And therefore the Mishnah is saying you're a Mishaneh. And therefore once you change, you have no right. And therefore automatically you're going to be liable. And therefore you're Gazlan. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Dilma atam nameh da'ata de purim u de'yahiv le. Over there you could argue you gave it for the purpose of purim. And therefore you're changing from the kavanah. And that's why it's a Gazlan. And you didn't give it to use it for something else. But over here, listen, he did give the animal to use. You can't call him a gazlan. It's a little different here. It's not like I stole your animal. You gave me the animal. You gave me a condition. Use it here, but don't use it over there. That's not the case where I gave you money for purim and use it for something else. That's mamash gazlan. I didn't give it to you to use it at all for anything else. Over here, I let you use the animal. It's just that you broke a condition. So maybe that's not considered a gazlan. That's the Gemara says. And he didn't give him to use for anything else. And then we cannot be an ayah from our Mishnah because maybe the Meir will not call him a gazlan in this case. Because, let me say it better. Even though he told him don't use it on the mountain, that's a caution. Maybe that's so makpid on that. But on Purim Day, he wants to use the money for Purim. There's more makpid on that. But maybe when he comes along and makes that condition, that's just like something that he wants him to be careful of, but maybe he's not so makpid. So the Gemara says, you're right. Ela Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Azarom and Rabbi Meir. There's a famous story. You gave money to an ani to buy a shirt. Okay? Lo yikabot talet. He shouldn't buy a talet. I gave you money to buy a shirt. He comes to the shul like that with a beautiful talet. What is this over here? Instead, I bought a talet. You're not allowed to. Talet, lo yikabu haluk. The guy comes the next day. with a nice shirt. Where's your talit? I said, I saw a nice shirt in the store, I bought the shirt. You're going against the Baal Bayit. Means you cannot do what you want. The Baal Bayit told you to do something, so you have to do it. And therefore, you're a Gazlan, because you didn't listen to the instructions. Oh, so that's the same thing with the Hamor. No, Del Mashani Atam. Over there is different. Why is it different over there? Over there is different. That when you don't listen to the Baal Bayit, maybe when in the Hamor case, he's not considered a Gazlan. Well, in this case, will be the reason why the Bimir said it's Asur, the Atul Mehshedeh. You're bringing the Baal Bayit to suspicion. Everybody heard in Shul, the guy got up and said, Abotah, I'm donating talet. I'm giving the money to buy talet. The guy comes in the next day wearing a shirt. The people say, this guy, he doesn't listen. He promised him a talet, he didn't get him a talet. Where's the talet? And meanwhile, he gave him the money and he didn't listen. So it could be over there. The reason why the Bimi is strict is because you're making the Baal Bayit look bad in the eyes of the people. The Atem is why the Amre in Amar Planya Zabinin Alebusha Lefloni Anya. Well, I'm going to buy a levush for this guy, for this poor guy. Velo Zabane, and he didn't buy it. I'm going to buy him a talet. Velo Zabane, and that's why the Bimi says that the Aniyim shouldn't change from what the Baal Bayit said because it makes the Baal Bayit look bad. But in this case over here, nobody knows anything. He rented a hamor. Maybe the Rabbi would not say that he's considered a gazlan or considered a mishaneh if he took it into the mountain. If you have no proof, Imken, the Gemara says, wait, if that's the reason that you're saying that if the ani uses the money for a shirt when he should have used it for a talit because of hashad, because of suspicion, let it say that. Litni mipnei hashad. It doesn't say that. The reason the Braita gives is because he didn't listen to the Baal Bayit. Nothing to do with Hashad. Shma mina mishum deshanihu. The explanation is because he deviated. There you have it. And anybody that deviates from the Baal Bayit is a Gazan. That's the Bimi'ir. And therefore this guy came along and said, I'm renting you my hamor. Toda Rabbah. Only to go in the valley. And instead he took it in the mountain. And what happened? I told you what happened. It got struck by lightning. What's the deen? According to Bimi'ir, Hayav. Why? Because you were Gazlan. Why am I a Gazlan? Because you were Mishaneh. You deviated from the instruction of the Balabay. You rented an animal and it became Hivrika. What's Hivrika? My Hivrika. It got dots in the eyes and as a result it went blind. Rabbi Amar Abzeket. Abzeket means it got eaten by some bugs, in worms, in its legs, and as a result, it can't walk so good. A guy once told the king's men, Abzeket b'miltad de malka. I went into the king's closet and I see the moths are eating the king's clothes. Amruleh, so they said, wow. Which garments was the moths eating? The silver ones, silver means pishtan, linen, because it's light, or the wool ones, which is what you call it gold, the red ones. So therefore, which begadim was the moths eating? The silver, meaning the linen, or the gold, meaning the wool? Ikada amre betle kesef. He said, oh, it was the linen ones. Amar, he said, that's what he said. Because they killed him. Why they kill him? Because he's lying. If you know anything about moths, I see you don't know anything about moths. They don't eat linen. So therefore he must have been lying. V'simanach, linen, lying. Ika de amre betle dehab. He told them that what? He told them that he ate the wool. Amar, v'shavkua. Wool? Yeah, okay, you're making sense. V'shavkua, they let him off. Okay, now you heard the story. Or shena'asit angaria. Let's say the government took the hamor from the renter and they conscripted it into the army or into the king's work. So what do we say? The owner could say, it's your problem. Your mazal. Amarav lo shanu ela bangaria chozeret. אבל הנגריה שאינה חוזרת, חייב להעמיד לו חמור. Interesting, which means like this. Let me explain to you the Metziut. Used to be the armies would come from town to town. When they get to a town, they see a hamor, so we're taking it for ourselves, and they continue going. When they get to the next town, they give the hamor back to the first guy. They take the next guy's hamor. They keep on going. So the Gemara is saying, when do we say that the renter is not compensated by the owner, and the owner could say it's your problem? That's when, let's say, the renter is going in the same direction of the king. He was going in the direction anyway. So the owner will say, anyway, you're going in that direction. Your work is over there. So follow the hamor, and by the time you get to your destination, the king will give it to you back. And therefore, what do you want from me? However, if let's say the king is going in one direction, the guy's working in a different way, then already the guy can say, wait, he's taking me out of my way. I have to go down this way and wait for the guy to give it to me back. Then already the Mishnah will say the owner is obligated to give him a new hamor. That will be the difference. Shmuel says, no, it doesn't make a difference. Ben angaria chozeret, ben angaria she'ena chozeret. Im bederech halicha nitla. If let's say, Omer lo hare shelcha lefanecha. Oh, I'm sorry. The first answer is, I jumped the gun. The first answer is chozeret and not chozeret. Chozeret means if the king's custom was to give back the hamor, so the owner could say he's going to give it back to you. So you wait a month, you'll get it back. If the custom of the king is not to give it back, then already the owner is obligated to compensate. That's chozeret or not chozeret. Is the custom of the king to return it or not? Od pa'am. If he returns it, so then what? So then the owner could say, wait. But the guy said, but I have to wait a month now. I rented a cow. I rented a hamor to work. It's your problem. You have bad mazal. What should I tell you? You have to go get a beracha. You have terrible mazal. When it comes back to you, you'll work it. And in the case where it doesn't come back, then the owner could say, the renter could say, listen, how long should I wait? The Mashiach comes, he's not giving it back. Not giving it back, then the owner has to compensate. Second answer is the answer I told you. Ushmael Amar, Ben Angaria Hosir, Ben Angaria Shos. It doesn't matter whether you return it or not. It all depends on the direction. In Bederech Halicha Nitla, if it was taken on the road. There's the Beki'im guys. The Beki'im guys are rowdy. Not that we're going to start it, but we're learning the Gemara now. So the Gemara comes along and says, if it's in the direction of halicha, in the direction that he's going, here, take it. Okay, sorry boys, I'm going to have to mute you for a minute.
Just lower the volume, Rabbi.
It's okay, boys. Rabotai, please mute your phones over there so we don't interrupt the shi'ur. Toda rabba. Again, I take it back. No toda rabba. No toda. Metibe, we have a question. הסוחר את החמור בבריקאו שנשתתתה. Let's say you rented a hamor and it went blind or it became demented. The hamor is what? The hamor is why he was a gaon before? First he was a gaon, then he became nishtateta. Stam hamor shote. He became demented. I don't know exactly how. More demented than he already was. No hamor lo hakam. The hamor. Bebrika or shenishtateta, who became demented. So the owner could say, this is it, your problem. Meta or shenasit angaria. Here's the problem. Let's say the king took it as it conscripted it into his army. You have to replace it. Now, according to Rav, la kashya kan ba'angaria chozeret, kan ba'angaria she'ena chozeret. We can answer very simple. Over here, the reason why the owner could say why it says that he's hayav is because it's talking about where the king is not going to return it. That's where the owner is hayav. But if the owner, if the king will return it, then the owner will not be hayav. We can make that simple distinction. Ela l'Shmuel kasha, but according to Shmuel, we have a kasha. The Gemara says, why do you have a kasha according to Shmuel? We'll make the same distinction. V'chita mitzvah nami la kasha. Kan shebederech halichatan nitla. Kan shelo bederech nitla. Make the same distinction of Shmuel. If it was in the direction where he was going, the renter, then already he doesn't have to get him a new donkey. Just wait until the king will give it back to you. And if he's not going in the direction, he does. Whatever you're going to say for Rav, you can make the same distinction for Shemuel. He says, no, because Because the Sefer says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer, אם בדרך הליכתה נטלה אומר לו, הרי שלך לפניך, ואם לאו, חייב להעמיד לו חמור. Rabbi Shimon, at the end of that braita, makes the distinction whether it's in the direction of the renters traveling or not. Michlal de Tana Kama lo sharin. It sounds like Tana Kama doesn't make that distinction. Only Rabbi Shimon does. So then we have a problem with Shemuel. Amar lecha Shemuel. Lad mi'ika Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar de kai kibati. Ana da'ami ka Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. I don't understand what you want from me. There's a shita that follows me. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. I follow the shita of Rabbi Shimon. You ask me a question of Tana Kama. I don't hold like Tana Kama. I hold like the second opinion of the Braita. Ibayate ma. Kula Rabbi Shimon Azari. Actually, the whole Braita can be Rabbi Shimon Azar. לעשו למרס לבכי קטני, הסוחר את החמור ובלי כמה שאתה עומד לו, הרי יש לך לבניך. מתה או שעשית אנגריה חייב, להעמיד לו חמור, במה דברים אמורים, שלא בדרך כלל קטן לה, אבל, אתה בדרך כלל ידע אומר, לא הרי שלך, לפניך, דברי רבי שמעון אלעזר, שהיה רבי שמעון אלעזר אומר, אם בדרך כלל אתה אומר, לא הרי לפניך, ובנו חייב להעמיד לו חמור. And therefore, the Gemara comes along and says, that actually we could say the whole Braita as a Bishul and Azar, and Tana Kama as a Bishul and Azar, also that we have no question against Shemuel. He says, I hold like the whole, not only do I hold like Bishul and Azar, that is Tana Kama as well, and the Braita makes a distinction between if it's following in the direction of the renter, then the owner does not have to compensate him. If it's going in the other direction, he does. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen. Amen. All right, Rabotai. Beki in Ba'alaka.